Glenn Berry would like to welcome you as we bow hunt the elusive whitetail in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. The whitetail deer has steadily increased its range along the Canadian border westward to the Cascade Mountains in Washington state. These northern whitetail inhabit wheatlands, river bottoms, and timber parcels. Bow hunting the Pacific Northwest, a bow hunter's Garden of Eden. No less than 12 big game animal species are fair game in their respective seasons. The mountain goat and bighorn sheep are just a couple of exotic species that can be taken on a permit drawing basis. Two of the largest big game animals in the Northwest are the Yellowstone and Roosevelt elk. These majestic animals are well known for their spine-tingling bugles. Roosevelt are confined to the region west of Interstate 5 in Washington and Oregon. Mule deer have always inhabited the high mountains and the deserts of the Northwest. But whitetail deer have only rather recently begun moving into mule deer country. We have witnessed whitetail deer at elevations of more than 4,500 feet in northern Idaho and Montana. In this video, we'll be hunting in parts of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, all within a 200-mile radius of Spokane, Washington. There is a small but growing trophy whitetail population of an estimated 175,000 animals in this region. Big Bull Productions worked 2 years in the filming of Whitetail Rendezvous. All deer footage was shot in the wild, not in parks or on hunting preserves. All footage was taken either while scouting, 2 weeks before hunting season, or during actual hunts. It's important to study and understand the whitetail's feeding and bedding routine in the areas you plan to hunt. The first step in finding deer is to locate prime feeding areas. Deer also require good cover for hiding near the feeding areas. Thick underbrush mixed with agricultural land is perfect whitetail habitat. Once you have located these areas, you have found the deer. Keep an eye on the edges of any farmland late in the evening. Deer tend to move into the agricultural fields about an hour before dark. It's important not to disturb the area. Deer sense danger by listening to squirrels and birds. This is why it's best to watch from a distance using a spotting scope. The first deer to enter the fields are usually the does and yearlings, sometimes accompanied by a juvenile buck. The mature buck comes in last. The whitetail deer often change their patterns because of seasonal changes, like the first frost. The whitetail deer in northern Idaho keep their velvet until early September, breaking it off on small brush or trees. The mixture of blood and pitch darken the antlers. Now let's meet the bow hunters that participated in Whitetail Rendezvous. Jim Picola, age 25, lives in Aberdeen, Washington, and works as a logger in the Evergreen State. Jim has bow hunted for 7 years, taking several Roosevelt elk and blacktail deer. This will be his first attempt at hunting whitetail. Dan Berry, age 37, lives in Spokane, Washington, and has taken 4 different species of big game animals in his 19 years of bow hunting. Dan works as a welder in Spokane. boss, age 35, has bow hunted for 16 years, taking both deer and elk. Robin lives in Spokane. Glenn Berry, age 34, is the owner of Big Bull Manufacturing and Video Productions. He designed and markets his own elk and deer calls. Glenn has bow hunted for 19 years, taking 8 different species of big game animals. Our opening hunt takes place in the early season in northern Idaho. 8 days before hunting season, Glenn sat in one of his 3 tree stands with his 9-year-old son Chad and videotaped these bucks as they walked within 10 yards of their observation point. This was more than a scouting trip. This was a bonding between father and son, spending a few days enjoying the wildlife and forging memories that will last a lifetime for both. This was the second trip for Chad. Glenn was trying to teach him that the most enjoyable part of hunting is the hunt, not the kill. A second buck starts toward their location. This buck has an unusual rack with double points on one side. What a trophy. Just seeing this buck made Glenn's scouting trip successful. He decides to hold out for this buck come hunting season. Now, let's join Glenn on the opening morning of the Idaho bow hunting season. This nice, even 4x4 buck approaches his stand. Glenn has already decided to try for the unusual 8x5 buck he discovered during his scouting trip. This means, of course, that he'll have to pass up smaller bucks to get his chance at the big one. The buck is alarmed by the popping of the camera tripod.
He keeps looking out in the field towards the decoys. Try to get that camera to quit popping, you're gonna spook him.
A few days later, Glenn is in his tree stand and has a different buck move in front of him. Glenn has put out 2 deer decoys 50 yards down the fence line. One decoy with its head in a feeding position and the other looking into the field. It's important when using deer decoys to make sure there is no alarming scent left on them. Take every precaution when handling them, not to leave any human scent. Here's a tip when using a decoy. Take a piece of white tissue paper and pin it on the tail of the decoy. This will simulate a flicking tail movement.
There's a big buck coming in behind our tree stand. I think he's that big 8x5 buck. He still has all his velvet.
Glenn has positioned his tree stand to let the deer walk past him. Most deer will walk up to a fence, stop, and look the area over before jumping. This offers the hunter a good chance for a shot. The buck runs 80 yards and then jumps the fence with his last bit of energy. The shot was quartering away, hitting the liver and lung. The big buck barely makes it to the tree line.
The other two bucks are hanging right around, but I see him fall down right there. Nice big buck. The one I've been scouting for. He's a beautiful buck. I can't say that enough. I've spent a lot of time scouting these bucks, and some of them have shedded their velvet, and he had perfect velvet. You see he ripped his velvet when he hit the fence there. And the hardest part about it was, to make sure my tree stand was in the right place, so when they came in, I was in a nice close shot. I made about a 35-yard shot there on the buck.
Let's review the setup with an overview of the area where Glenn took this big 8x5 buck. Notice the deer decoys were set up 50 yards from the shooter, just outside the fence line. It was very important to place the decoys downwind of the shooter. Deer enter this field in 3 different spots depending on wind direction. Having more than one tree stand placed over different trails in case of a wind change can put you closer to the deer when they travel into their feeding areas. The rut is an exciting time to hunt. The rut starts the first week of November and goes through the end of the month. The peak varies from region to region, but as a rule, usually happens about the middle of November. Whitetail rattling and using a grunt call can help lure a buck in for a closer shot. During the rut, things can happen fast. Bucks move at all times of the day and night, looking for does. Let's watch as Glenn calls this buck in.
What a buck! What a buck! The shot was about 35 yards, and an arrow hit him right here. Recovery was 60, 70 yards. He ran right over this little hump right here, and we watched him go down, of course. You've seen it already in the video. But I tell you, he's a nice little buck.
Glenn's 5x4 buck had an inside spread of 14 inches and scored 110 Pope and Young points. Scrape hunting seems to be one of the most successful methods of bow hunting whitetail bucks. This small buck checks a scrape. Deer are always using body language. Notice his tail position after leaving the scrape. You can see how this buck identifies everything by smell. A hunter must be aware of his scent. He must make sure when he's walking to and from his stand that he's not leaving a trail of human scent. Danbury has the next hunt. He has placed his tree stand on this scrape line. There are 18 scrapes within a 200-yard radius. Always wear gloves when walking into a stand. Avoid touching as much as possible. When you get to your stand, try not to brush against the base of the tree when you climb. Dan knows there's a big buck in the area, so he lets this small buck go by. Now, let's join Glenberry and Jim Piccola as Glenn shows him what to look for on a scrape line. This is Jim's first hunt for whitetail deer.
We use this trail to come back out towards the field. That old buck's been using his scrape line again. You can see that there's tracks in it. It looks like a buck track there, and there's small tracks there too. So they've been using this scrape line. Looks real deep. How many years have you been using this for? I've been watching the scrape line for the last 3 years, and it don't matter if the buck gets killed that year. The next year, the most dominant buck in the area will use these primary scrapes like this. This is an excellent location right here. Looks like that old buck was really tearing up these limbs when he was making the scrape. Yeah, that's what this is what you want to look for. Is a rutting area that has scrapes they use year after year, and has the overhanging limbs. And what they're doing is when the buck comes in here, he actually wipes saliva on and chews on these limbs right here, and there's a gland right underneath their eye. He leaves his scent on this. And that's a calling card. saying that he's the most dominant buck and this is his area. These scrapes right here are excellent to set over. The guy has to be patient to set them out. We're going to be sitting here for a while.
Well, let's put up the stand.
Okay, this area right here, I've hung stands in and hunted it several times. The tree, there's a lot of backlight in here. When we get ready to set, you got to make sure that you're not moving around the stand. You got to have your bow. Any movements you make got to be real slow. This tree right here, I've used in the past and it works excellent. Even though there's a well-beat trail right here, the deer seem to use this trail and really beat it out. They're more a nocturnal trail. The trail they use in daylight is the trail on the other side going through the small pines over there. I've been scouting, I put in 100 hours of scouting earlier before the rut, and I know their patterns, so we should have excellent luck if we just put the time in.
Let's put up the stand.
All right, you're all anxious, huh?
I'm ready.
Well, good luck to you here, huh? Well, we got everything all set up. You know, if you let that buck get in between these two trees, if he comes in from this way, you have to set real still. I mentioned that earlier, but when he comes in this way, you should let him get in here and you should be able to get the bow drawn back. And with the camera in view up there on my tree stand, as long as you shoot him in this spot, we'll have her made. You know, the thing about it is if we go up any higher, we're going to be getting up in that skyline. So I'm sure he's not going to get your scent there. You going to be comfortable shooting like that, Jim?
Yeah, I think it'd be no problem. I'll have the tree to draw back. If he comes through here, I'll be able to draw back with the tree behind me, and there'd be no problem.
I think you want to be watching this way, because this is the best chance that buck's going to come from this direction. Now, the most important thing is, if he comes this way, it's going to happen real fast. If he should come from the field this way, it's going to give us plenty of time. I've seen him come both directions while I was scouting.
Either way, I could either draw behind this tree, or this tree, or behind this group of trees. Shouldn't be no problem at all.
Several days later, they return, and Jim gets his first chance to hunt over a traditional scrape line. This spot is unique. Not only is it a hot scrape line, it's also a bottleneck between the bedding area and the feeding area. The does enter the area. It's very important not to alarm any deer. These does just might be the calling card to a big buck. Biological reports indicate that the peak in breeding occurs around November 23rd, with 70% of the does being bred 7 days either side of this date. With a gestation period of about 200 days, we can expect most of the fawns around Flag Day, June 14th. These two rooster pheasants give Jim quite a show. A hunter must be persistent to be successful. Jim has occupied this tree stand for 4 days before he sees this buck walking toward him. first whitetail buck has an inside spread of 12 inches and scores 100 Pope and Young points. He used an Anderson 3-blade broadhead with an Easton 2213 shaft. The buck went down in less than 100 yards with a double lung hit. Let's join Glenn as he calls this buck in for an almost textbook demonstration.
Oh well, can't get them all. His nice little 3-point. He just came in, we watched him come real good, and he got there and he got behind that darn tree, and I just couldn't get a good shot at him. I let him step forward, and I just shot right underneath him. Well, we'll set another stand tonight, and hopefully I'll shoot a little better tonight if one comes in. You hear so much about rattling down in Texas, down south. But here in the Northwest, it works as well as anything I've ever seen. There's some things that I learned about rattling. One is, you need, in our mountainous country in here, we have a lot harder time getting the sound to carry in a natural state. In other words, you can't go beating the antlers together to try and just make them louder because it isn't realistic. Another thing is that in our kind of country, we have a lot more country per deer. So, one of the most important things about rattling is, that I've learned, is to be where the deer want to already go. I like to set up over top of a scrape, downwind of the scrape, in a tree stand. And what I do is I start with initial clunk, grind, tangle the antlers, and break. Grind, tingle the antlers, and break. Not rattling as loud and as aggressive, more of a grind, just a and broke it off. I rattled about every 30 minutes. From that day on, we started rattling bucks in. Every time we went out for the next 4 days, we rattled a buck in.
Glenn morning starts with a combination of soft grunts and some antler rattling. It's early morning. Minutes later, he sees this nice buck come into his stand. From the time the arrow struck, it took only 12 seconds for him to fall. It's amazing how effective bow hunting equipment can be.
Oh wow. 6 on one side, 4 on another. Shot him with a PSE Firefly. Set at 78 pounds with a 2016 arrow. Arrow hit him right in the back here as he walked past me in the tree stand. It was a big thrill, I tell you, to watch this guy come walking right underneath my tree stand. He came there and I had one little opening to shoot him when he got into those trees, and I wasn't about to let him walk by. Nice buck.
Glenn's big whitetail buck scored 123 6/8 Pope and Young points. Since a decoy worked so well in the early season, Dan Barry decides to try it in the rut. This area has a lot of open ground. Finding traditional scrape lines was very difficult. The buck seems to locate the does by smell and sight. Now let's join Dan as he watches this buck in the field. out in the field after the buck. Dan decides to try and lure the buck into the decoy by using a grunt call. The small 4x4 buck runs near the tree stand, but never sees the decoy. Dan has a 10-yard shot at him, but waits until he's in view of the camera. The buck moves behind his tree stand and disappears. A few seconds later, a big 4x4 buck comes in again, behind the tree stand. This time, the camera picks up the action. The camera's wide-angle lens makes this shot appear much further than it is. The buck stops at 35 yards. Dan draws his bow, shoots right over the buck. The arrow ricochets off a rock into a tree. The buck stops and gives Dan one of those looks that will last a lifetime. Then he walks away. Dan whispers that buck better look out next time. Dan's trophy pine had an 8-inch circumference and was 20 feet tall. Taken with a PSE bow set at 70 pounds with an Easton 2216 arrow.
Shooting from a tree stand takes some practice. What I have down here is a full-bodied Bill Egner 3D target. Now, one of the most difficult parts about shooting from a tree stand is when you become elevated, the distance from you to the animal, in this case the target, seems like it's a lot farther than what it is. The best way is to, when you get up in the tree, look straight across. Judge your yardage straight across, or better yet, walk it off from the base of the tree. Now that becomes difficult again if the ground isn't level. So I'm going to take a few shots at this target, and what I'll do is I'll concentrate on aiming at the opposite leg on that quarter and away shot, and I always aim at the bottom third of the animals. Whitetails are real jumpy. When they pop with the bowstring, they actually drop about a third of their body width in just fractions of a second. They'll drop down. So now I'll take a few shots. when you're sitting in a tree stand, what I strive for is my tree stand placement is to have the deer come walking by me. As soon as that cup of that ear is forward, that is the best time to draw your bow back. Let the deer walk past you a little bit. This is a perfect situation right here. So I let the deer walk past me. I got a little bit of a quarter away shot, and I'll just shoot enough behind the shoulder in case he ducks down in a way that I'm not going to get out and hit the shoulder blade. What I'm looking for is that opposite leg on that little bit of a quarter away shot.
This large 6x6 set of antlers came off an Idaho buck that eluded many hunters in the woods. He met his match on the highway by a woman driver. Most states offer an either sex hunt for bow hunters. This helps to keep the buck and doe ratio at a healthy level. But by no means are does easy targets. Now let's watch as this doe gives Robin the slip. Robin has another doe walk under his stand. This one's not going to get away. We cannot overemphasize how important it is to aim at the lower third of the deer's chest. As you can see by the line, the deer drops down fast. Let's join Glenn as he plays with this elk calf in eastern Oregon. The Northwest has many states that offer deer and elk season, which run concurrently, though there are very few areas that elk and whitetail deer mix in good numbers. Glenn has won many elk calling contests, including the NBA World Championship and the Canadian Grand Championship. He has also shot 19 bulls with archery equipment. Let's watch as he calls this spike bull into his tree stand. Watch closely. In the lower left corner of your screen, you can follow the flight of the arrow. Recovery was less than 100 yards with a double lung hit.
All right, got good blood. About a 35-yard shot out of the tree stand there. I waited about 15-20 minutes now, and I got excellent blood. I thought I heard him fall about 75 yards in there, so let's go find him. Got a little bit of blood there. There, and there he is. Huh? Uncut. Got long spikes on him too. Nice bull. Beautiful little bull. Arrow hit him right here, went completely through like you've seen. He's going to make a nice meal on the table.
Now, let's take this opportunity to review and study the locations we used in Whitetail Rendezvous. This hunt took place on November 27th. The tree stand was placed in the center of the hub of trails. The deer were using the field as a main runway. A decoy was used, hoping to draw the buck into the tree stand. The mistake was in the placement of the decoy. The area selected for the decoy had too much brush. This nice 3-point buck gave Glenn the slip on November 16th. An overview of the area shows how the fence line played a major role in the deer's movement. This spot was in a bowl, so the sound carries well for calling. Glenn used antler rattling and grunt calls during a morning hunt. This buck came off the ridge, circling to the scrapes. It was the 23rd of November when Jim Piccola took this nice buck. An overview of this area illustrates how the creek converges with a ridge, forming a 50-yard bottleneck for the deer to pass through. It also had a traditional scrape line. The thick cover gave the deer security, moving to and from their feeding areas. Placing the tree stand downwind of the scrape paid off. The big whitetail buck came into the rattling and grunting sounds on the morning of November 15th. An overview shows how Glenn placed his tree stand over a traditional scrape line. The buck walked within 3 feet of his tree stand. Like most hot scrape lines, it parallels the feeding area. The does moving from their bedding area to the feeding area would have to cross it to get to the field. There were 16 large scrapes within 300 yards. We hope you have enjoyed Whitetail Rendezvous. This is Ron Harris, wishing you a very safe and happy hunting trip. And may you rendezvous with the elusive whitetail.
Like you know you can do it. Seeing how things fit together. Knowing you'll know when you have it. Willing to go to anything. I'm on a rendezvous. I'm on a rendezvous. I'm on a rendezvous. I'm on a rendezvous. Feeling like you know you can do it. Seeing how things fit together. Knowing you'll know when you have it. Willing to go to any length. I'm on a rendezvous. I'm on a rendezvous. I'm on a rendezvous. I'm on a rendezvous.
Big Bull Productions travels throughout North America to bring you action-packed video of dedicated bow hunters as they pursue big game animals under fair chase. Learn from the experts how to call, stalk, and bait in an easy, relaxed, informational series, giving you true hunting adventures in video. Glenberry would like to welcome you as we bow hunt the beautiful wilds of the Pacific Northwest. You'll have the rare opportunity to study trophy black bears at a very close range. Travel as far north as Alaska's Prince William Sound, where we hunt giant black bears. 2 of these northern blackies placed in the top 10 of the Alaska Pope and Young records. In this 60-minute video, you will observe 10 different black bears while learning the secrets of baiting. Capture on videotape some of the most spectacular bear footage ever. All this and more in Bear Action. Learn how to call elk with Glenn Berry. Watch Glenn call this bull in for a 30-yard shot. This instructional video has been used by 2 Montana guide schools. Learn how to bugle with success. In this 60 minutes of exciting, action-filled video, you will experience the thrill and excitement of stalking giant black bears. Watch as we take a huge black bear with archery equipment, the largest such trophy ever captured on video. Bear Action 2 was videotaped under fair chase on Prince of Wales Island, Alaska, one of the hottest spots in North America to collect trophy-sized black bears. Glenn Berry and his 2 bow hunting partners, Tracy Lucas and Tom Hedquist, collected 5 Pope and Young black bears on this hunt. Using the techniques outlined in this video, watch these bow hunters harvest monster-sized black bears. 3 out of the 5 scored over 20 inches. The largest officially scoring 20 and 11/16 Pope and Young points, and hide squaring nearly 8 feet. Yes, this was a hunt of a lifetime for black bear, and was completely captured on videotape for your enjoyment in Bear Action 2.